Just because you don't know what it is you're looking at doesn't mean it's intelligent aliens visiting from another planet.
These pilots actually saw and filmed things that were flying that they couldn't explain, and even the Navy probably doesn't really know what they are, but I would bet, my guess is they're classified aircraft programs.
I believe that there are other beings, but I'm not sure that I believe in aliens.
Ron?
Wait, you really think there's other beings, but you don't believe in aliens?
Is it like,
I think she said beings, actually.
Welcome everybody to Second Earth Alternative. This is your host, Felipe Osorio. So, wow, the Navy has apparently reported that UFOs are real, but most importantly, this has created a very interesting point in our civilization where there are going to be all kinds of philosophical discussions being talked about. What does all of this mean? You know, what's kind of bothering me a little bit is I'm seeing the news and it's just like this brainwashing cycle of like repeated like talking points. And one of them that I want to talk to you guys about, basically I want to kind of hammer down the philosophical ramifications of what all of this means and perhaps give you guys some tools to be able to make the correct argument to when you want to discuss this issue. So something that I found really interesting is that people keep arguing that UFOs, now that UFOs has been admitted by the Navy as being something that is indeed anomalous, something that they cannot explain, what I find fascinating is how people are continually hiding from this subject of extraterrestrials, as if there's some kind of boogeyman from space that's gonna, attack them from their childhood fears. I mean, come on, this is just a natural extrapolation of what it means to be humans. I mean, we can't be the only ones. So what does it mean to learn from another culture, for example, would be another form of extrapolation, except it's a culture with a lot bigger unknowns, a lot bigger room for learning as well. So I don't know why people seem to hide away from the subject other than they might fear some kind of egotistical reason. I don't know. Maybe you can tell me in the comment section. But one of these arguments that I keep hearing from people is that if these UFOs are real, they don't necessarily mean they're aliens, right? That's what they're saying. Maybe it's the military has been like the trending scapegoat, or it could be the Chinese or whatever. Now, the problem with this argument is that people who are familiar with ufology and in general and its history, they know that UFOs is not just a modern thing. I mean, maybe it was accelerated after the 1947 Roswell crash, but let me show you what I'm talking about. They wouldn't make movies called Cowboys and Aliens for no apparent reason. And the real reason is that during the Wild Wild West, people actually reported flying vehicles coming from the sky. I mean, these are true cases. So outside of Cowboys and Aliens, we also have the Aurora, Texas crash. I don't know if you heard about this one. Now, what I find so fascinating about this case is that there was an actual possible alien after this crash that had been buried in the town, according to local news stories. And apparently there's one investigation that even went there and not only found the potential gravestone, but had discovered metal that had been possibly buried with the body. Now, I don't think they ever were able to actually dig the site because the cemetery officials didn't give permission. And upon returning, I think the initial reading seemed to not be there, which, take it as you will. Either they got it wrong or there's some kind of mass conspiracy that they actually exhumed the site itself. But what's so fascinating about Aurora, Texas is that this crash, if you didn't know, happened in 1897, which would be before airplanes were ever even invented. So even the idea that humans can strap onto some kind of flying vehicle, well, it was still science fiction at the time. Maybe you had blimps, but that's not really what the description of this crash was. This was kind of like a fast-moving object that came down and tore down a windmill, apparently. So outside of cases like the Aurora, Texas, we also got the Nuremberg, Germany mass sighting that happened in the 16th century. And let me show you what else is really interesting about UFOs in our history. It also extends to religion. And I would say that some of the religious paintings, some of these Renaissance paintings, might actually be some of the best ancient evidence that there were some kind of flying vehicles in the sky that people had particular interest in. Things that obviously in the 1500s could not have been from the military. But you might be familiar with this one. We've showcased this one many times in our channel. This is the Madonna with Saint Giovannino. And to me, this is pretty typical of a flying saucer. And I wanted to kind of quiz you guys for a second. What does Art de Gelder's The Baptism of Christ have in common with Carlo Crivelli's The Annunciation of Saint Emeritus? What do you think these two paintings have in common? Now, I know it's kind of hard to see. Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit. And here is The Baptism of Christ by Art de Gelder. Well, look, they both have UFOs on them. That's correct. But there's something even more interesting, more specific, that I didn't notice this until I actually edited a video sequence in one of my episodes, and it was super zoomed in, and it couldn't be more obvious. Maybe I should just show you the video. Let's take a look. We did a YouTube censorship video a long time ago. Actually, this video has been deleted since because of well, reasons I don't want to talk about today. But anyways, if we go to the very end of this video, check this out right over here. I went ahead and showcased some alien artifacts, and then I showed the painting by Art de Gelder in the very end, and check this out. Okay, so we start zooming in, and look at what's in the center of the flying saucer. Aha! Look, I honestly, I didn't even know that that symbol was there. I just kind of noticed this only after editing. But as you see, it's a dove. We got a dove right over here next to the flying saucer. So what does a dove mean? I mean, dove has a lot of symbolisms in all kinds of religions, not just Christianity, Islam, Judaism, but in Christianity specifically, which is what we're dealing with here. It says here, in Christian iconography, a dove also symbolizes the Holy Spirit. Interesting. This is referenced by Matthew 3:16 and Luke 3:22. The point being that what we're calling as obvious flying saucers, how people described it, how Bob Lazar in the Joe Rogan podcast, in the tunes of 10 million people, that's what he described, this flying saucer. This, they're saying in the Bible, that is the Holy Spirit. So now we have opened a huge new channel of where saucers and aliens might have been spotted in human history. Because now we have to start backtracking. Where is the Holy Spirit mentioned in the Bible, in apocryphal texts, and all the other religious texts related? You know, this is huge. This opens up a huge gateway to understanding the topic of ufology. The idea that the Holy Spirit might be interchangeable with a flying saucer. Not to mention that dove is also a symbol for messenger, which is kind of interesting. But if UFOs are real, right, how do you find evidence of it? I mean, you see, the thing is, you don't really have to be abducted to get evidence of UFOs. You just have to use a little logical deduction. So if we actually went to space and there are UFOs, which are supposed flying vehicles from outer space, well, don't you think when we went to space, if they existed, that there might be evidence from the picture evidence, maybe the video evidence? I mean, the Apollo moon tapes went missing, very convenient, but the evidence I'm talking about are the Apollo images that were captured during the flight. And let me show you what I'm talking about here, because just to commemorate the idea that military sector like the Navy actually said that UFOs are real, well, let me show you something that's really kind of interesting. We went and took some images from NASA, and let me show you what we got here. We got this moon UFO from the NASA image. Check this out. We got this little anomalous object, right? Very interesting looking already. But check it out when I put some channel mixers, just to show you what we got here. I mean, Here's another version of it. But I'm looking at this. This is coming out from the images of when we actually went into space. And then I look at this. I go, holy shit. They look kind of similar. Why should I not believe that this could be the same phenomenon that's being described in centuries ago, and another one that's being documented only decades ago? And look, if you don't trust NASA, right? Why don't you just take a telescope and point it at the moon? Get a nice, clean, full moon. Point a telescope at it. Take a video and see what happens. Do you have infrared? I didn't have infrared in my camera, but we decided to zoom in with a telescoping lens and a 4K camera all the way to a brilliant full moon, and this is what we got. This is an actual UFO that we just randomly captured by just wanting to capture the moon. So let me fast forward real quick. Here is the camera that I use. It's a Samsung NX1. It's a hybrid mirrorless camera. It's no longer in production. We use this particular lens, which is like goes up to, I think, 210 millimeters. And let me show you what we captured over here. Look at that. Look at that little object going across. Let's see if I can zoom in a little more for you guys here. Make this a little bit bigger. Look at that. Okay, so check this out. You see that little object racing across the moon? Now, we did some analysis. That's not the International Space Station. This thing is actually racing across the moon a lot slower than would have been expected if you were trying to actually capture the International Space Station. Very crazy, right? That you can just put a telephoto lens to the moon and capture something like this. Here is a closer version of it. And you can see it kind of blinks in and out. It's hard to tell if that blinking in and out is related to artifacting from the frame rates, but either way, it's very interesting. Look, here's the same image in inverse colors. And you can see even more clearly inverse. And then this line is to show you that whatever object was racing across the moon it kind of raced linearly. So it didn't seem like there was any curvature in its trajectory. So I would assume that it wasn't actually on the surface of the moon, but standing in front of the moon and the lens at some distant point, enough where it looks sharp. So it's probably not something that's close to the lens, not a lens that long, So there it is. I mean, outside of some of the CIA files that we've given before that showcases that this has been talked about, or at least in a way that the CIA has been shamming a lot of the scientific investigations since the 1950s. Now that you guys see that this has been prevalent since the religious times, and UFOs could actually be the meaning of Holy Spirit. And then when you look at all the other ancient descriptions, from the cowboys to Nuremberg, Germany, what I'm trying to say is, don't let these intellectual big heads try to push you over with their argument that, oh no, this can be military. Because all you have to do is look at the actual history of ufology to know that this is, frankly, just a bogus argument. And that is the episode for today. Thank you so much for joining me. This is Felipe Osorio, signing out.